Today is bigger than you think. Something has been quietly building up, and if you really think about it, this month didn't start normal at all. It came in with pressure and movement. We've been hit with a lot of relevant spiritual events at the start of this month. You weren't supposed to notice it all at once, that's why it felt scattered. And today is where it lands. Nothing that's happened recently was isolated. It only looked that way because you were seeing it piece by piece. But when you step back, the pattern becomes obvious. One event happened, then another, each one slightly more intense than the last. We've seen a recent surge in solar activity and flares. There have also been subtle earthquakes, real shifts in the Earth itself. And on top of that, the pink moon still hasn't fully settled. None of it stood on its own. And now you're here, at the point where it all connects. This is what people miss. They wait for one big, obvious sign, not realizing that the real signal is the pattern itself. The build-up was the message. Moments like this don't happen by accident. They happen when something is being prepared, when something is about to shift direction without making a loud announcement. And today isn't just another day inside that sequence. It's the point where it turns into something else. But if you think this is about what's happening outside, you're already looking in the wrong place. If you've been feeling off lately, not in a dramatic way, but in a way you can't quite explain, you're not imagining it. This isn't just a lot going on. This is everything happening at once, and some people are picking up the full weight of it. When multiple intense moments stack into the same narrow window, it doesn't feel clear. It feels overwhelming, like your system is trying to process too many signals at the same time. That's why simple things suddenly feel harder than they should. Decisions that used to take seconds now feel heavy. Time feels strange, rushing in one moment, dragging in the next. Even normal environments can feel off, like you don't quite fit into them the same way. And the frustrating part is, you can't fully explain it. But this isn't confusion, it's sensitivity. Overwhelm is what clarity feels like before it organizes itself. The truth is, nothing is wrong with you. You're not falling behind. You're not losing control. You're just feeling more than most people are willing or able. And the people who feel nothing, they're not more grounded. They're just not tuned in to the full signal. Earlier this week, something happened that most people brushed off as just another full moon. But that moment wasn't just something to look at. It was something that pointed forward. That specific moon has always carried a quiet meaning. Long before people tried to explain it, they felt what it marked. It was never about the moon itself. It was about what came after. This was the point where everything begins to turn, where the waiting phase starts to close, where something that's been building quietly finally reaches the surface. The signal always comes before the shift, never after. That moon was the signal, and today is the response to it. Not in a loud, obvious way, but in a way that changes direction without asking for attention. Something that was paused is no longer paused. Something that was forming is no longer forming. It's here, and if you didn't catch the signal when it happened, you might completely miss what it just set into motion. Right now, a lot of people are feeling the urge to get their life back under control, to organize things, make decisions, bring everything back into balance like it's supposed to feel steady and clear again. But that instinct is exactly where people go wrong. This moment isn't balanced, and it's not meant to be. When everything compresses into a short period like this, things naturally feel uneven, unpredictable, slightly out of place. That's not a problem to fix, it's a condition to understand. The mistake is trying to smooth it out too quickly, trying to force clarity where there's still movement happening underneath. People rush to label what they're feeling, to resolve it, to get back on track, not realizing that the track itself is shifting. There are moments where confusion isn't a sign of being lost. It's a sign that things are rearranging faster than you can interpret them. If you try to stabilize everything right now, you end up interrupting something that's still unfolding. Not everything that feels off needs to be corrected. Some things feel off because they're in the middle of changing shape, and if you interfere too early, you miss what they were becoming. When people think about Easter, they jump straight to the idea of resurrection, of things coming back, of renewal and new beginnings. But they skip over the part that actually gives that moment its meaning. Resurrection only exists because something fully ended first. There's always a phase before the turning point where everything looks finished, where nothing seems to be moving, where it feels like whatever you were expecting is no longer going to happen. That part of the story is uncomfortable, so people ignore it, but it's the most important part. What's been happening over the past weeks carries that same pattern. There's been pressure, intensity, build-up, but also a sense that things weren't fully resolving, like something was stuck in place without clear direction. That's not failure. That's the phase right before the shift. You don't recognize the turning point while you're in the dark. You only realize it was the turning point after the light returns. And that's what makes today different. It's not just another continuation of what's been happening. It's where that stalled, unclear phase begins to move in a new direction. So the real question isn't what's happening out there. It's what in your life has felt like it reached an end, like it stopped, like it wasn't going anywhere anymore. Because this is the exact kind of moment where those stories don't stay the same. And now, it's time for today's comment. Solitude is not loneliness, it is communion. A lot of people mix those two up. Loneliness feels empty, it feels like something is missing, but solitude can feel full, like you're actually reconnecting with yourself instead of avoiding yourself. It's not isolation, it's presence. And once someone experiences that difference, being alone doesn't feel like something to escape anymore. It becomes something you can actually value. Thank you for sharing this perspective. There's a very specific shift happening right now in how people experience time, and most don't even realize it's happening. It's subtle, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Waiting doesn't feel the same anymore. For a long time, waiting felt like control. Taking your time, holding off, staying in place until things made more sense, that used to feel safe, like you were being smart, like you were avoiding mistakes. There was comfort in not rushing, in observing, in staying where things were predictable. But now, that same waiting feels different. It feels heavy. It feels like you're holding something in place that doesn't want to stay there anymore, like you're delaying something that's already trying to move forward on its own. And that's what creates this strange internal tension. It's not anxiety in the usual sense. It's not panic. It's not even pressure coming from outside. It's something much more direct than that. It feels like a quiet push, like something inside you has already made a decision before you've had time to fully process it. That's why hesitation feels uncomfortable now, because it's no longer neutral. Hesitation only feels safe when nothing is moving. Once movement begins, it starts to feel like resistance. You can see this shift in how people are acting. Decisions that used to take weeks are now being made in days. Things people tolerated for years are suddenly being questioned without warning. Conversations are changing, becoming more direct, less filtered, less patient. Even the way people think is shifting. There's less overanalysis, less going in circles, less need to justify every step before taking it. And for some, that feels unsettling because they're used to taking their time. They're used to waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect clarity, the perfect sign before moving. But that's not how this moment works. This kind of moment doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It moves first, and then you catch up to it. That's why going back to how things felt before doesn't work anymore. You try to slow down, to pause, to stay where you are, but it feels forced. It feels like you're trying to stand still on something that's already in motion. And that creates that strange discomfort. Not because something is wrong, but because something has already started. There's a point where waiting stops being patience and starts becoming avoidance. And a lot of people are right at that point now. They can feel that staying where they are doesn't feel right anymore, but they don't fully understand why. So they try to rationalize it, to explain it away, to convince themselves that nothing has changed. But something has. The internal shift already happened. And once that happens, everything else starts to follow. Your actions, your decisions, your priorities, even your tolerance for certain situations, it all begins to realign with that shift. That's why things feel faster, more direct, more immediate. Not because time itself has changed, but because your relationship to it has. And once that relationship changes, you don't move the same way anymore. You don't wait the same way. You don't think the same way. You don't delay the same way. You start moving with something instead of against it. Most people go their entire lives without really thinking about the sun. It's just there, always in the background, doing what it's supposed to do, rising, setting, keeping things predictable. It's something people trust to stay consistent, which is exactly why it matters when it doesn't feel that way anymore. Because whether people realize it or not, everything here is tied to it. Before there were systems, before there were explanations, before anything was measured or labeled, life followed the sun. Not just in obvious ways like day and night, but in deeper rhythms, growth cycles, behavior patterns, timing, even the way people felt without being able to explain why. It sets the baseline. So when that baseline shifts even slightly, it doesn't stay isolated. It ripples through everything that depends on it, which is everything. And recently, the sun hasn't been quiet. It's been active in a way that stands out, even if most people don't fully understand what they're looking at. There's been a noticeable increase in intensity, in movement, in unpredictability. This isn't about fear, and it's not about trying to explain it scientifically. It's about recognizing a pattern that has always existed. When the sun becomes more intense, things here don't stay the same, not because it directly causes events, but because it raises the level of everything that's already present. It amplifies what's already building beneath the surface. Think about how different everything feels when the environment changes. When the light is stronger, when the heat is higher, when the conditions shift, things that were stable before start behaving differently. That's what's happening now, just on a level people don't always consciously notice. The sun doesn't introduce change. It forces what was hidden to become visible. And that's why this moment feels the way it does for some people. Not overwhelming in an obvious sense, but more like everything is slightly more intense than usual. Thoughts feel sharper. Decisions feel more immediate. Things that used to be easy to ignore now stand out without effort. It's like the margin for avoidance has gotten smaller. You can see it in how quickly people are reacting to things they used to tolerate. How certain situations that felt manageable before suddenly feel unnecessary or out of place. How there's less patience for things that don't feel aligned, even if nothing dramatic has happened. That's not random. That's what happens when the underlying conditions shift. Intensity doesn't create pressure. It reveals where pressure already exists. And for people who are more sensitive to these kinds of shifts, this doesn't just stay external. It becomes something you feel internally, even if you can't trace it back to a specific cause. It shows up as a sense that things are speeding up and becoming more real at the same time. Like there's less distance between what you feel and what you have to face. When you step back and stop looking at each event on its own, something much more interesting starts to appear. It's not just that multiple things are happening at once. It's that they're all expressing the exact same pattern, just through different layers. What you're seeing right now is pressure being released everywhere at the same time. The sun builds up intensity and then releases it. The earth builds up stress and then shifts to release it. The moon reaches a point of completion where everything that was being pulled finally peaks. And the meaning tied to this moment in time has always revolved around something reaching its absolute limit and then turning into something else. These aren't separate ideas. They're the same process, repeating itself across different levels. That's what makes this moment different. It's not just one layer going through change while everything else stays stable. It's multiple layers aligning around the same movement. The electromagnetic, the physical, the cyclical, and the symbolic are all expressing the same thing at the same time. And that's rare, because usually things shift in isolation. One area changes, then another, and it takes time for everything to catch up. But right now it's happening simultaneously, which creates a completely different kind of moment. The most powerful shifts don't happen in one place, they happen everywhere at once. That's why this doesn't feel like a build-up anymore. It feels like something is already in motion, like something has already crossed a point where it can't go back to how it was. And this is where most people misunderstand what they're looking at. They think all of this is pointing towards something that's about to happen, like it's a warning or a preview. But that's not what this is. This is the demonstration itself. This is what it looks like when pressure turns into movement. When something like this is happening on a larger scale, it doesn't stay separate from your personal life. It reflects into it, often in ways that feel confusing if you don't recognize the pattern. Because the same process that happens in the earth when pressure builds and releases happens in people too. There are moments in life where things seem stable on the surface, but underneath, something has been building for a long time. Tension, realization, misalignment, questions that never fully got answered. It doesn't always look dramatic while it's happening. In fact, most of the time it looks completely normal. Until it doesn't. Until something shifts, and suddenly, everything that felt stable starts to rearrange itself. That's what a personal shift actually looks like. Not a collapse, not a failure, but a redistribution of pressure that was already there. And this is where people get it wrong. They experience that shift and immediately think something is going wrong, that things are falling apart, that they've lost control, that something is breaking, but that's not what's happening. The moment things start moving is usually the moment people think they're falling apart. In reality, what's happening is much closer to what happens in the earth. A system that holds too much pressure for too long becomes unstable. But when that pressure starts to release in smaller, continuous ways, it actually prevents something much worse from happening later. So the people going through change right now, the ones dealing with decisions, endings, redirections, things that feel uncertain or unfamiliar, they're not in a breakdown phase, they're in a release phase. And those are completely different things. A breakdown stops everything. A release moves things forward, even if it feels uncomfortable while it's happening. Now connect that back to what this moment represents. And if you're still here, still watching, I genuinely appreciate that more than you think. There's a lot happening right now, a lot pulling people in different directions, and the fact that you stayed through this says something about where you are in this moment. Not everyone catches these kinds of windows while they're in them. If something in this video stood out to you, even in a small way, then you're already more in tune with what's happening than you realize. You don't need to chase this moment or try to force meaning out of it. Just being aware of it is enough. This isn't about having everything figured out today. It's about recognizing that you're in a point where things are shifting, whether it's obvious yet or not. Some moments don't ask for action. They ask for awareness. So whatever comes next for you, move forward with a sense that things are opening, not closing. Even if it doesn't look clear yet, even if it feels uncertain, it doesn't mean you're off track. You're just in the part of the story where things are starting to change.